Hi, I'm Susan Main. I'm an artist, curator, educator, and organizer. I'm the founder of Cultivate, an evolving collection of artists driven by investigations of land, place, and the commons. It's my pleasure to share in this brief webinar an overview of creative approaches to interdisciplinary collaborations. Why even collaborate interdisciplinary wise? It's my feeling that knowledge and experience come together to yield something fresh, impactful, and inclusive in collaboration. The process generates new knowledge, behaviors, and methods of outreach. What do scientists and artists bring to the collaborative table? How can we share our skill sets and enhance each other's work? Here's a little slide that I put together showing some of the similarities and processes involved in making art and doing good science. First of all, there are questions. We both have cool skills and tools that we bring to the process. We do research. In art, we kind of go into this place where we're composing, designing, moving elements around, experimenting with them to come up with some kind of expression. With scientists, you're starting with your research, your data, you're forming a hypothesis, you're using scientific method, and again, experimentation plays a big role. Both art and science have an element of risk, and they're driven by wonder and curiosity. How can we help each other work on questions that intrigue us? How do we open up creative thinking to address our big questions? I like the word synergize as it describes what can happen when science and art come together. In this excerpt from an article about why and how artists can engage with scientists, with a number of different collaborators on this article, artists, writers, scientists. The feeling is that art can build bridges to bring community members into conversations involving science, helping them position themselves as knowledge holders and contributors. That goes through both the initial collaboration between an artist and a scientist to all stakeholders involved in the dispersion of really interesting exploration of particular questions. There are three modes that this article pointed to that scientists and artists can get together. The first is more what I would think of as a commissioning sort of mode, when artists are recruited by scientists to help interpret and communicate scientific findings or conclusions for broader audiences. Sometimes this is the feeling I get when scientists are saying, can you make a cool poster, or can you design some beautiful illustrations to go along with this work that I've been doing to communicate to a larger audience. That's where an artist can step in, and there's a more of a client and provider model where the artist is commissioned by the scientist. In the second mode, artists are inspired by the elements of science, and they're using them as ways to go forward to find their own artistic expression. They look for scientists and ask them about their tools, what kinds of data they're finding, and hopefully their questions are sort of mingling with each other. And so it feels like a fruitful way to maybe begin a really deeper collaboration. The third mode, which is my preferred mode, allows for the broadest and most equitable and possibly the most satisfying collaborative experience. It potentially yields a third sort of process, a true collaborative process, and possibly a product. In each of these modes, art can build bridges to bring community members into conversations involving science, helping position them as knowledge holders and contributors. This process dissolves boundaries, defining who is the scientist, and enables equitable access and contributions to knowledge making. And so here's my little crazy diagram again for what a successful collaboration could yield. And this is based on the third mode of collaborating, where art and science come together and they aren't either or, one taking precedence over another. They're yielding a third thing, not one in service of the other. Each discipline contributes to something new, something integrated, unified, and impactful. I feel like through this process of this deeper mode of collaboration, we can strengthen, stimulate, generate, and empower. An example lies in your own backyard of the Maryland Sea Grant. Cy Keener, who is an interdisciplinary artist who's focused on recording and representing the natural world. He's an assistant professor of sculpture and emerging technology at the University of Maryland. You can go visit him. He's in the art department. Since 2018, he's collaborated with scientists to document sea ice, icebergs, and glaciers in the Arctic with funding from multiple institutions, including the National Science Foundation. His work includes a range of data-based installations to visualize diverse phenomena, including sea ice, wind, rain, and ocean waves. He received a Master of Fine Arts from Stanford University and a Master of Architecture from the University of California, Berkeley. I became acquainted with Cy's work. The work that he developed at the Headland Residency, where he programmed a sculpture to send the wind from the Headland site perched above the Pacific Ocean to another site. The wind data was transferred from one place to another. A kinetic sculpture in both places registered the wind data. So there was a poetic transference of data from one place to another, requiring consultations with engineers and programmers to make it happen in real time. As the curator of VisArts in Rockville, Maryland, I invited Cy to bring his research, which involved placing sea ice buoys, which he designed, in the Arctic Ocean to record the thickness and color of sea ice and sending it back to VisArts. The many-layered project combined collaborative creative approaches with landscape architect Justine Holzman and with scientists that were experts in documenting sea ice, icebergs, and glaciers in the Arctic. Multiple institutions helped with this work, and it was funded in part by the National Science Foundation. The data was sent back to Maryland and translated into digital prints that were installed as a growing sculptural data bank and an art installation. It's a beautiful piece, deeply connected to the data received and the expertise of the scientists involved. Both parties, artists and scientists, gained new knowledge from Cy's little Arctic buoys that were implanted in the ice. The work was exhibited and knowledge shared in public presentations and papers, bringing people closer to the phenomenon of daily ice loss in the Arctic. With every additional daily sea ice drawing, the public was pulled closer to the shifting conditions in the Arctic. How can art-science collaboration enhance meaning, impact, growth, and outreach? This quote I thought was quite lovely and perfect for this idea about collaborating with scientists and artists. Whereas science, through its objectivity and rigor, distills the human being out of ideas, the arts reconstitute science to include human beings. A quote from Anissa Ramirez. And another quote from naturalist Aldo Leopold, with his groundbreaking 1949 book, A Sand County Almanac, claimed, "We can only be ethical in relation to something we see, understand, feel, love, and otherwise have faith in. For many, numbers are not enough to achieve this relationship. Enter art." Another of my wild drawings here, made with my finger on the trackpad, showing all the different overlapping layers involved in true collaboration. The process of collaboration becomes synergistic and shows this relational energy, linking aesthetics to breakthroughs, surprise with knowledge, metaphors and analogy, interdisciplinary strength with adaptation, communities, cool tools, behavior change. All of these things, I think that both Sea Grant scientists and Cultivate artists are really interested in, bringing together a very holistic approach. This is a slide from Future Farmers website, which is linked here, and you're welcome to explore it in depth. But Future Farmers combine community action and engagement with land use, farming-like strategies, and social sculpture. I really like their approach because they go into communities and they ask a lot of questions. And often the questions have to deal with, how can we be a better community? How can we understand a little bit more about the natural world and the qualities of life here in our particular site? Their projects draw people closer to these particular qualities of specific sites. In their Soil Horizons project, they designed an interaction between clay and data and sound. It wasn't quite the clay sound, but the abstracted sound of its properties. And this is just a little bit, you can see people participating, putting their feet actually on the soil. Future Farmers' work often provides a playful entry point and tools for participants to gain deeper insight into the fields of inquiry, not only to imagine, but to participate in and initiate change in the places we live. They conduct hands-on exploration of how people and things, neighbors and grains affect each other. Kimberly Blazer, beauty can also teach us things. I think quite a wise statement. When we're thinking about scientific data, often the numbers just don't translate, as we heard from Aldo Leopold. Kimberly Blazer is an Indigenous poet, photographer, and a professor at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. She emphasizes this journey of inquiry for both fields, where you run into questions you had not expected or contradictions. And the meeting of culture, beauty, stewardship, ritual leads to effective and effective experiences that grow engagement to explore solutions and build meaningful, lasting relationships. Blazer is an enrolled member of the White Earth Nation of Minnesota and describes art and science in indigenous cultures, noting how rituals pair ceremonial aspects like dance and song with environmental practices. This builds a creative, culturally inclusive collaboration that also we find in the work of Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is a mother scientist and a decorated professor, an enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And she's also an author. And also Max Leboyron's research. Max Leboyron, Max Leboyron is a researcher, scientist, and a founder of CLEAR, an interdisciplinary plastic pollution laboratory, whose methods foreground humility and good land relations. Max has influenced national policy on both plastics and indigenous research and invented technologies and protocols for community monitoring of plastics and created protocols for fostering research collectives. These are positions that I feel advocate for interdisciplinary design approaches that center land, the sea, human and non-human communities. Community engagement, ritual, writing, artivism, these are some of the outcomes of these really new and inclusive collaborative experience between disciplines. Getting started. This is the wild and exciting part of any collaboration. At first, it can seem undisciplined and raw because you're coming up with all kinds of possible ways that you can go. And that's what you really want to happen. You want this sort of wild and no holds barred sort of approach to just extracting from each other what the most important questions are. And then going wild again with a design approach. Like, what's the craziest idea that you can come up with? And then how do you work backwards? How do we start to figure out how we can execute some of these wild ideas and make them really impactful, share them with other people? Slowly, after this enthusiastic stage, comes a time when you start to find what the useful parameters are for a collaboration. It's also the best way to see what questions are really the most intriguing to both collaborators. Sometimes you may find that maybe this collaboration isn't for us. We're not on the same page. But usually there's a time when you're thinking, wow, that's really interesting. That's a way that I never thought about. That's a question that I never put into my research. Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on the solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. For once I know the proper questions, I could solve the problem in less than 5 minutes. From my experience, there's no shortcuts to successful collaborations and no unsuccessful collaborations. Something always happens. Knowledge and skills grow. Creative approaches are useful at any stage of development, and designs can come at any stage of the collaboration. Questions can be questioned. A willingness to explore new directions and strategies to shake up entrenched habitual behaviors or processes, a willingness to see things from a different angle, and commitment, a commitment to each other with respect, commitment to unsticking when stuck, to searching without knowing the path, being a little lost. That is where artists dwell and can help scientists explore. Scientists have creative ways of setting parameters and revisiting questions. Together, they can set up the conditions for alternative lines of inquiry. And as you can see in this slide, this is sort of it's not a step-by-step formula. I think that these things come and go in the beginning where you're brainstorming, you're conversing, you're listening, you're respecting, you're trying to find what each other's questions are, what your tools are, what your experiences are, just getting to know each other and deepen a relationship. And then slowly establishing a preliminary collaborative question and trying to be very specific about that, which is really a challenge. And then in this process, is there a spark? Is there mutual admiration? Is there mutual collaboration, a sense of curiosity about what the collaboration could yield? In this process, you have to commit to meeting regularly. This is a very big key to making a collaboration successful. Oftentimes people get together, they start the exciting part, the wild part where they're really creative. And then as things slow down, as they start to really dial it in. And this takes time and lots of discussion. And along the way, there may be some conflicts, some decisions that one party may find not the adequate decision for the the whole project to move forward. This is when you're looking at funding and you're saying, is it adequate for really addressing all the parts of this collaboration? Is it open for both process and product-based outcomes? Where are the sources of this additional funding that we might not have at our hands? Can we dig in and sort of set a list of a to-do list? Who's responsible for what? And it also, you're diving into each other's fields. And for artists, you're coming in with a certain skill set, and you might find that they're asking lots of questions that are rudimentary because they don't have the background. But those answers that you give and those explanations and being able to really look at the work that each of you are doing is really important. That's when you can try new processes. You can entertain maybe new metaphorical kinds of translations of each other's work. You can be very playful. And then as we're looking at the outcomes, we're not really sure at this point what the outcome is. We may have some preliminary sort of ideas about how we'd like this to have a result at the end, but still you're generating some experiments that will play with what the best form will be. And I urge you, all of us, to be prepared for lots of different iterations, lots of nonlinear thinking, and then dialing it back in with a little bit more practicalities behind it. And then be really prepared for something that you're completely surprised by how things come together. And as I said before, make sure you are clear about delineating and sharing responsibilities, and then set upon executing your project. Follow-up, evaluation. In the art world, evaluation is really tricky because we're often talking about qualitative information rather than quantitative information. If you look anywhere about how to evaluate the impact of art projects, you'll find that anecdotal feedback, descriptive kinds of qualitative information is often the way to go. And this doesn't seem anything like maybe what a scientist is used to producing in terms of the evaluative sort of format. But I think together, that's what at least I see is happening with a number of science researchers who are trying to be more inclusive of different cultural approaches are looking at, because there's some emotional qualities that lead to behavior change that artists can really sort of dig into. And with the help of science, data-driven information, the two together can really have a powerful effect. Again, look at the funding. Was it adequate? Do you want to look further? Are we finding sources that are resilient? Funding resilience is a very important thing, looking for those grants that include both process and product-based outcomes, not just one or the other. And then you try it out and see what happens, and brainstorm new iterations, improve upon one of the ways that you decided to pass that information out to the public. And it goes on and on. And if it's a sustainable sort of process, you're thinking about a question that's a big question that's got lots of complexity to it, and it requires time to unfold. So what kinds of forms will collaboration generate? Well, as you can see, exhibitions, ceremonies, dance, performance, operas, plays, animations, public events, joint publications, artivism, which is arts-driven activism, artist residencies, films, I mean, it's sort of an endless list, and there's no one perfect way. So sorry, let me go back to that slide. No one perfect way to do it. It can be none of the above, it can be all of the above, it can be hybrids. And again, I referred to the Future Farmers approach to a project called a meander. And as you can see, this slide shows some of the results of involving the community and their environmental concerns for a particular site and some of the forms that were made. So how do we find each other? Well, that's what this whole collaboration between Cultivate and Maryland Sea Grant is. And here's information about Cultivate. We're a collection of interdisciplinary artists, writers, and researchers. We're looking at a broad spectrum of investigations of land, place, and the commons. We are interested in all of the different ways that we can expand our notions of landscape to include relational aspects, lots of different voices, different generations, and sustainable tactics for approaching these big issues of how we can center the land and the sea and all the elements in our work, which will reach more and more people. So here's some information you can take from the slide, and hopefully all the links work. And additional sources here of information that was referred to in this webinar. And my information, the bio template that we are all filling out together to create the platform so we can hopefully connect people together, those who are artists and connected to those who are scientists with similar lines of inquiry and hoping to get together to solve big questions. So thank you very much for listening, and please feel free to send me an email, and you can reach me either at my Gmail account or at the Cultivate account, and ask questions and comment on what you heard today in this webinar. Thank you.